Yeah, it's your boy Real Funny as fuck in the building. You know, we back at it again with another YouTube reaction video. It's time to put your educational helmets on, boys and girls, because this is another educational video. We got the 10 most brutal human deaths ever discovered. Ever. Ever. Ever, ever. Ever, ever. Ever, ever, ever. Let's get it.
Heard of the show 1,000 Ways to Die?
Hell
Well,
yeah.
if you take a look at our 300,000 years of history, you'll soon come to realize that 1,000 isn't nowhere close to cutting it. Try more like 1,000,000, if even that's enough. And through the ages, people have had to endure some pretty painful demises, some of which were definitely worse than others. But thankfully, thanks to technology and general progress, horrific endings are becoming less common than they used to be, especially because of just how tough ancient Earth was compared to now. And we can only guess what kind of bowl our ancestors had to go through. But once in a while, we don't have to, as occasionally, researchers will get really lucky at the expense of a seriously unfortunate individual. And we get to see firsthand some of the catastrophic injuries that ancient people had to endure, and sometimes even survived. But the first case definitely wasn't a survive kind of situation, and unfortunately is a mode of death still within the realm of possibility, as it was a shark attack. But not just any old shark attack, but rather the first conclusive one recorded in history. An achievement that certainly nobody wants to have, but nonetheless goes to a 3,400-year-old hunter-gatherer from Japan, simply dubbed Tsukumo 24. The discovery was made in 2021 off the coast of the Seto Inland Sea, where researchers located a male human skeleton in really rough condition, being absolutely covered in lacerations that spread across his arms, chest, abdomen, and hands. Originally, researchers were quite horrified and confused, as they were so deep that they marked bone, and matched what was seen in wounds caused by metal weapons, not animals or non-metal tools like a stone knife. What's more, is that we weren't just looking at a few cuts, and not even a dozen or two, but instead, over 500, 790 to be precise. And what made everything all the more weird was that the man had belonged to the Jomon culture, in which metalwork was absent, meaning it wasn't some deranged serial killer that had caused this with a metal weapon. Therefore, they took another look at the injuries, and noticed this time around that they were V-shaped and identical to those seen in modern-day shark attacks. This, in conjunction to his location, which was on an archipelago, led to the conclusion that a large tiger shark or great white had killed him, and it really did a number on him during the attack, administering multiple injuries that were fatal within their own right, including the fracture or tearing of every rib, the evisceration of his chest cavity and abdomen, and to top it all off, multiple dismemberments, which included both his feet and left hand. These missing extremities also helped to tell researchers that the poor bloke was alive in the initial attack, since he...
Sorry for pausing, but just imagine you being the first person to ever have something occur to you that nobody else has even endured or experienced, and you don't get to live to share your side of the story of how it all went down. Just imagine that. Cause then you could have been the first person to let everybody know how you could have been, how they can avoid situations like this. No matter how many safety precautions we put up right now, there's still gonna be some type of horrific event that's still gonna occur down the line within the years. That shit is crazy, bro.
also helped to tell researchers that the poor bloke was alive in the initial attack, since he likely used his hands and feet to defend himself, during which they were then bit off. This got rid of the possibility of the whole thing being a scavenging event as opposed to an attack, but led to a new question of why the shark had attacked him in the first place, as it was his left leg that bore the most deep bites, heavily implying an unprovoked ambush attack. And the answer was hidden in his bizarre final resting place.
Damn.
Opposed to being found at sea, as one would expect, or in a place that was once submerged, the victim was found in a traditional burial site, and his bodies did not show signs of being in the water for long, meaning that he likely wasn't alone at the time of the attack. And given that the Jomon people were exceptional fishers, the current belief is that a group of people had gone out on a boat to catch fish. At some point during the fishing excursion, the unlucky man had left the boat and got into the water to perhaps spearfish or to simply bring up a catch, not knowing that the spilled blood in the water had attracted a shark, which then swiftly attacked him. Seeing he was in danger and under attack, the others that were with him then came to the rescue and pulled him up, but it was already too late, and the only thing they could do was bury him, as he likely died well before reaching the shore. Now, if you're planning a trip to Japan, don't panic quite yet. Yes, there are still sharks there now, but the situation was much dicier back then, with a number of known shark teeth implying that their populations were significantly higher than they are now. And this is also reflected by the Jomon culture, which features multiple art pieces that depict various sharks, namely hammerheads and tiger sharks. So it's likely that attacks were much more common back then.
Hammerheads.
Now
are
clearly,
so
this particular
ugly.
incident had a rather regrettable ending.
What
But
made
not all
they
horrific
fucking
injuries
skull
ended
just
so poorly,
expand
as
out
sometimes ancient humans not only survived traumatic wounds, but even thrived afterwards, as best showcased by the world's oldest known amputation, which dates back to 31,000 years ago. For a long time, researchers have been well aware that amputations occurred before modern medicine, but previously, the oldest known case was only 7,000 years old, involving a Neolithic farmer from Europe. So everyone was pretty excited when in 2020, a group of scientists stumbled upon a much older specimen in Borneo that bore signs of a successful amputation. The individual in question was found in the Liang Tibo cave, and notably was missing its left leg and foot. At first, there was an idea that it was lost in some traumatic accident, which then possibly killed the individual. Yet researchers noticed that not only was the wound extremely clean, but it was also healed and seemed purposeful, and the rest of the leg was partially withered and child-sized, while the specimen overall was clearly a young adult, making an amputation as a child the likely scenario. Now, because this took place over 30,000 years ago, painkillers were probably absent, and the amputation would have occurred with a sharpened stone tool. And yet somehow, the ancient surgeon not only managed to finesse their way around veins, arteries, nerves, and tissue, but kept the area completely free of infection, a feat still impressive by modern standards, as some studies report an infection rate of up to 40% after major amputations. And the prehistoric individual went on to survive into adulthood, only dying in their 20s from something unrelated and currently unknown. But now, this all begs the question, why did they need an amputation in the first place? A possible idea is that it had something to do with the area that they lived, as the terrain surrounding the cave is extremely rugged, elevated, and littered with large rocks and cliffs. Therefore, the person could have taken a particularly nasty fall or got hit by a rock that mangled their leg to the point that amputation was necessary. And while it's thought that they survived for nearly a decade after the incident, it would not have been easy, as they still needed to navigate a mountainous area with just one leg. And therefore, they must have relied quite a bit on others for care, demonstrating one of the earlier cases of human compassion. But alas, we also know that humans in the past, and present for that matter, can be quite cruel. And you'd know this all too well if you saw my recent video about the Neolithic bottleneck. That was a period of unusually cruel violence, which could be downright horrifying to say the least. And one of the worst cases of it was seen in the girls of St. Paul Troy, Chateau, France. This grisly discovery involved 3 women who were found buried together back in the 80s, but dated to about 5,500 years ago. And only recently did scientists unveil that a cruel sacrificial ritual had taken place.
What the fuck?
In total, 3 victims were found, and yet 2 of them were buried in very contorted positions and stuffed into very tight spaces, while being completely covered by heavy grindstones, likely meant to keep them down and from moving, signifying that these 2 had been buried alive and against their will. Furthermore,
Buried alive, bro? Buried alive, bro? You mean to tell me 3 women got buried alive due to a sacrificial ritual, bro. So was this around the time of the witch trials, sacred witch trials, when all that shit was going on, when folks was getting blamed or falsely accused for being witches, and half of them was real witches? Cause like three, three women, bro, three, and then they was tied up. That had to be like around the witch trials or something, bro. Cause ain't no fucking way. Ain't no way. Cause if this was considered cruel punishment, or they going through something because they did something within, or they broke the laws within their country or tribe or some shit, that's the only reason why. That's the only other explanation or thought that comes to my mind. Like this would be a cruel punishment, and then they dig them out within like 5 minutes. But to be held down on rocks and tied up, they had to think they ass was some witches or something. Cause ain't no fucking way. Even though witches, they burn witches, but this is something else. This is something else. That shit's crazy.
Or the positions of their arms and legs suggested that while decayed now, a rope had at some point not only bound them, but tied their legs to their necks, causing them to involuntarily strangle themselves, and coincidentally, mirroring a torturous killing tactic sometimes used by the Italian mafia, named incapacitamento. However, while mafias do it today for revenge against traitors, these Neolithic murders were some sort of agricultural sacrifice, as they were buried in a structure that mimicked a silo grain, and the third woman was buried on top of them, unbound, and above the stones, presumably for symbolic purposes. The location was also quite peculiar, as it was built in a way that during the solstice, the sun would shine directly onto the silo. So in other words, whoever was behind this was quite twisted, yet unarguably well organized. Now, a less organized, but more strange and rare killing took place not so long before this. However, this incident occurred on the other side of the world, and involved the only known prehistoric sapien to be found in a tar pit, the La Brea woman. In case you didn't know, Los Angeles is home to the La Brea tar pits, which is actually an active paleontology site that has served as a predator trap for tens of thousands of years, as animals who got stuck in the sticky tar would in turn attract many unknowingly doomed carnivores, and it is believed to be up to 50,000 years old. And through the years, paleontologists have recovered thousands of iconic Ice Age specimens, like direwolves, ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, American lions, mammoths, mastodons, and then primates. Or rather, a primate. To be specific, a lone woman.
They just came out with a fucking movie called Primal or Primate, involving a monkey who was rescued from captivity and then placed in a home and just went rogue as he started to grow up. We really are made from fucking chimpanzees and monkeys, y'all. That's why we be so hairy all the damn time. Cause where do half of this hair really come from, bro? I know y'all gonna say it's puberty, it's hormones, it's this, is that, but just if you really recognize where the fuck we come from, nigga, this earth started off with dinosaurs. Reptiles, mammals, omnivores, carnivores, the whole 10 yards. And as time and evolution passed, each chapter on this earth gets cut out, rebuilt, cut out, rebuilt, cut out, rebuilt, cut out, rebuilt. And now we on human civilization. We on this time era, this trial era of the earth. And shit is progressing. Shit is progressing. So who knows what's gonna happen in 2030, 2040, 2050. Who knows what's gonna happen as many years get passed down. We don't know what's in store on this earth. We don't know what's coming next. And sometimes that can be scary, y'all. That can be really fucking scary. That's just something to think about. That's just something to think about.
To have been between 18 to 30 years old at death, the La Brea woman is a well-preserved skeleton that consists of cranium, mandible, and postcranial material. In life, she likely stood around 4 feet 10 inches, or 1.5 meters tall, and lived some 10,000 years ago, where based on her dentistry, she sustained herself on a diet heavy in stone ground meal that apparently led to tooth issues, and could have caused quite a bit of pain in life.
Yeah.
But putting all that to the side, the biggest issue obviously had to do with her being buried in the tar pit. You see, this was quite odd, as Paleo-Indians were definitely well aware that such a pit was dangerous and best to be avoided, which led researchers to suspect that she had a rather nefarious helping hand in ending up there. And upon further examination, they did indeed find that her jaw had actually been broken, while her skull had been fractured and possessed a small hole in it, indicative of a powerful strike, and not the one that came from an animal, but rather from a quote-unquote fellow human, which if accurate, would make her LA's oldest known murder victim, given the age of the skeleton. And though highly debated, it's been hypothesized that given the location, that she had belonged to the Chumash people. Yet why she was attacked is not known, nor if the attack came from her own group, over personal discourse, or if it originated from a hostile party.
Literally, what the? I think it's Ice Age. Damn, it is Ice Age, but which one? It's the one I'm remembering the exact one when Sid had to fucking take that little boy into custody. He wore the same little fur coat that this little boy is wearing right here. Literally, that looked like his ass almost just, There we go. This the little fucker. The little Roshan nigga. I gotta hold up. Yeah. I wanna get a picture with him in this exact little coat. They ain't got it. They got a clip of it.
Or if the attack came from her own group, over personal discourse, or if it originated from a hostile party that was looking for resources and potentially viewed her as a threat. Additionally, even though her wounds were almost 100% guaranteed to be fatal given the level of medicine at the time, it's not clear if she had died first and then was dumped in the tar pit, or if she was thrown in there while wounded but actually died from sinking under and suffocating in the tar. Now obviously, neither are good ways to go. And honestly, I'm not sure if I'd rather get bonked or drown. And unfortunately though, we know that definitely happened with another specimen, who's now known as the first modern human that we know of to have drowned. And ironically, he did so in one of the driest places on Earth, the Atacama Desert. This harsh and unforgiving region is found in Chile, and is perhaps the oldest desert on the planet, meaning that at any rate, this Neolithic man who dated to 5,500 years ago still lived in the area when it was absolutely bone dry. Yet his body was found in a round stone structure on top of seashells, which does kind of make sense because he lived on the coast, meaning that water was accessible. Okay. Originally, scientists weren't sure what happened to him, as he wasn't super old, being about 35 to 45 years old at the time of his death, and he didn't have any clear fatal injury or disease either. However, because he lived close to the sea and was buried with lots of shells, there was a thought that he drowned. But how does one...
I know they talked about amputating legs and shit, but just back then, you never know what disease or parasites was lurking in them forests back then when folks had tribes and shit. So I wonder, how did they go about treating diseases? Cause I feel like one person was smart enough in every tribe to come up with medical resources, no matter what. They used to put, I know I used to see in movies and shit, like they used to put mud on your infection. Mud, leaves. They'll burn the surrounding area. They'll drain the blood. If you got bit by a snake or some shit. I was trying to think of a fifth one, but it's not coming to me. But I'm gonna just leave you with those four: mud, leaves, fire, and draining the blood from venomous snake bites and shit. I just want to know, how did they actually come up with natural resources, and what told them in their mind that this might work for this and that might work for that?
Figure out if a 5,000-year-old plus man drowned or didn't with just bones. And surprisingly, you take a look at those bones and look for diatoms, which is basically any member of a large group comprising of several genera of algae. And alas, diatoms were indeed found in his skeleton, implying that he drowned. And let's just say, that's a very unpleasant sign, because the only way that diatoms can end up in one's bones is that you inhale water such that when it reaches the lungs, your pulmonary alveoli rupture, where then salt water rushes into your bloodstream before making it into your bone marrow, and hence the presence of these algae. So, a very brutal ending for an already harsh life. As it turns out, the man was already in very poor condition, showing signs of having arthritis bad enough to damage his bones. Damn. And his legs were roughed up as well, suggesting a life spent squatting, perhaps to harvest shells, while his arms and shoulders were further messed up, reflecting a life rich in swimming, rowing, and harpooning, which matches the assumption that he was part of a coastal community. And you know, just for a cherry on top, he also appeared to be extremely iron deficient, an ailment that was chalked up to a severe tapeworm infection, which can be common in mishandled fish. And just to make everything a tad bit more...
What the fuck I just say? Parasites. Tapeworms.
Tragic, it turns out that he did not die alone, but with 3 others. Another male, an adult female, and even one infant. Radiocarbon found that all 4 had died at the same time. But how, you might ask? Well, they lived in a very seismic area, and so it's believed that an earthquake and then a subsequent tsunami is what did them in. But what's rather peculiar is that when they tested the rest of the skeletons for diatoms, they found none, heavily suggesting that unlike the man, they had not drowned. And so now, while it's still possible that an earthquake had killed them from the non-drowning related dangers, it is now less likely that a tsunami and earthquake is what did them in. And the current hypothesis is that the man just accidentally drowned, maybe while diving down to forage, while the others just happened to die around the same time and location from other causes. After all, the Atacama Desert was and is a very grueling place, where it can be hot, cold, and very, very dry. Although it should be said that Earth back then was also just in general tough, disregarding location, and sometimes we humans made it more painful than it already was and had to be. I mean, just take a look at this guy, or this girl, or really any of the other 38 humans found in France with holes in their skulls.
Damn.
What you're looking at is not a mass murder crime scene or even warfare, but rather a poor attempt at surgery, also known as trepanning, which, as the skulls show, involved drilling a hole into one's head, and was perhaps Homo sapiens' first widespread surgery. Unfortunately, the site in France specifically dates to about 6,000.
You mean to tell me you trying to do surgery? Y'all attempt to do surgery by drilling a fucking hole in my head? Who the fuck genius idea was that? Oh yeah, we're gonna drill. Alright, so this is what I came up with. We're gonna fucking drill a hole in your head to see what the fuck is your problem, and then get to the root of the problem, and then I don't know how we're gonna cover it up, but yeah, like bro. Can we opt out of the surgery? I'd rather just die. Let me deal with whatever I got going on in my head. I don't want you drilling shit in my head.
1500 BC, making it one of the oldest, if not the first cases of trepanning that we know of. But it was by no means isolated, and multiple sites have been found with evidence.
Now just imagine you fucking rubbing your head and then you just feel that. You just feel some soft gooey shit right there. You just feel your brain. Like you pushing part of your skull in, but you remember that's what a hole is. Like bro, that shit is nothing but fluids. Wouldn't that be worse? Now brain matter fluids is leaking into your skull. I feel like that would cause more problems than you actually drilling a fucking hole in my head. Now y'all just
Of
killed
this strenuous
innocent people.
procedure, supplying us with an abundance of brutal fossils, with some studies even suggesting that up to 10% of all Neolithic people underwent this treatment, if you can call it that. And in the French site, it was closer to 33%. And given the super high rates,
Fuck you, man. Almost everybody went through this shit. You got me fucked up. Fuck that trial.
you'd assume it was pretty safe. But no, it's about what you'd expect from drilling a hole in your head. And less than 40% of the skulls showed any signs of healing, meaning more than 60% died. With the main
Exactly.
ways of death likely being infection, blood loss, and of course, trauma to the brain if the surgeon went too deep.
Exactly.
And even if they were in the metaphorical clear, healing was no joke, often taking several months for the area to close up. And even then, it was likely you'd still feel awful. Plus the fact you had to endure the surgery itself, which definitely took place with no painkillers or anesthesia.
Exactly.
Now, to do the surgery, it's thought that sharpened stone knives, or in some cases even seashells, were used to carry out the procedure. And people at virtually every age were found having done this. And so looking at the widespread nature of this procedure, you might ask, what was the purpose of this? Well, basically anything, according to some. Potential reasons included spiritual purposes, treatment for epilepsy, relieving head wounds, which were more common at the time, courtesy of ourselves, or it could have been done for something as simple as a headache. So basically, if you wake up in ancient times and you have a throbbing mind,
You mean to tell me if I got a migraine, a headache, a fever, a concussion, the only result is, bitch, you go puncture a hole in my head? You got it. You got it. Get the fuck away from me. You got it, bro. You fucking got it. Like, what? What?
Migraine.
Used to relieve pressure. Documented use as early as 500 BCE. Drilling, using a trephine drill/drill. Scraping using an abrasive instrument. Cutting using an incisive instrument. Boring and cutting using a drill and an incisive instrument. Like, food. No. No, buddy boy, no.
Best to keep that to yourself. And perhaps surprisingly, or maybe unsurprisingly, this surgery remained popular for quite some time, and actually is still carried out today, just with a bit more precision and only done in select cases.
You got me
Not to
fucked
mention,
up.
we now have much better management for the procedure and pain. And speaking of pain,
Oh,
that's
that's what
something
got
we seem to have
staples
left
in the
behind
table.
too. Of course, it's still a thing. But I more mean that life used to be so much more harsh and agonizing due to lesser technology. I mean, just ask the girl of Yuuuurrr, affectionately known as Mura by some. She is an Iron Age specimen that is also a bog
Why look like everybody's eyes so close together? Or is that just me?
body. In other words, a human that was found and sometimes naturally mummified within a peat bog. And just in case you're wondering what that is, it is a wetland that has accumulated peat, surprise surprise, and other decayed organic material. Now Mura was originally located in the year 2000, and her founders actually
What is
thought
it
that she had been a
on?
girl that went missing after visiting a club many decades before. But after doing some
Better not be
testing,
biting on
they
my
realized that
carpet,
she was in
bro.
reality a 1,000-plus-year-old skeleton who had lived in Iron Age Germany, and despite only being around 17 to 19, had endured more pain than most in their lifetime. Just about every bit of her body had some sort of damage to it. And even looking at it as a whole, researchers concluded that she must have led a life of intense physical labor, probably consisting of carrying heavy loads like water jugs as she routinely navigated through the marshlands. Then her head had not one, but two severe fractures that had healed over, demonstrating brain injuries that might have come from attacks by hostile people or even people within her own community, with her shape reflecting blunt impacts. And we do know that head trauma and violence were a bit more common during the Iron Age, but at any rate, she definitely survived that specific ordeal. Yet she likely suffered from frequent headaches and potentially other neurological symptoms. And it really seems like she couldn't catch a break, because she also appeared to have a benign tumor at the base of her skull that likely just compounded on her already existing headaches, while also causing a curvature in her spine, leading to back pain and chronically inflamed legs, which was severe enough to alter her bones. And while her own body seemed to be against her, so did the environment, as there were further signs that during harsh winters, she endured frequent periods of sickness and in her childhood had chronic malnutrition, reflected by the unusual morphology of her bones. So in other words, each day would have been a challenge for her, even if she didn't have to do anything, let alone survive during the Iron Age. And she clearly did not last long, because even 19 was considered below the life expectancy, which at that point
Damn.
hovered at around 26 years old. Now, we don't know what killed her, but it's believed that thankfully, murder was off the table, considering that there are no clear signs. And right now, it's tentatively believed that she died in a freak accident. However, one mystery that remains is that she was found alone and naked, with not even any objects or jewelry being associated with her,
They ain't found her
suggesting
hand
that someone
till
had altered her body
till
after
two-
death, and then
2005.
presumably buried her into the bog. Which again makes one
5
wonder,
years after
why?
her main-
Why not just bury
the
her
rest
on
of the
land?
her main-
And the answer
the
is that
rest
maybe
of
they
her
were trying to hide
remains-
something. And sadly, not even in death did Moore get a break, as when she was recovered back in the day, it was done accidentally after a machine had scooped up her remains, but not before ripping them into 100 different pieces that needed to be
Sit
stitched
down.
back together. So with that example alone, I think we can conclude that life can really just be dang hard, which is a fact shared by what is currently the first known victim of the plague, a 5,000-year-old hunter-gatherer from present-day Latvia. He showed signs of having died around the age of 20, and likely did so after being bitten and infected by a rodent. That
Damn.
unassuming bite would one day come to doom him, as it happened to be laced with a bacteria that humanity knows all too well, Yersinia pestis. In other words, the bacteria responsible for the plagues, like that of Justinian and the Black Death. So, not good.
Boy, when that,
Now,
like,
when you get the plague, it usually comes in 3 different
when I used to read in history class about the plague, fool, I'm thinking like, bro, around that time period, you have to be really fucking careful. I'm pretty sure he gonna tell me how many deaths was around that period of time. But it's like, cause I done forgot the number. But it's like, bro, you have to be really fucking careful about the way you moved back then. And like, was he sleeping in an area where there was rats, or he just came across a rat and just got curious and got bit by that motherfucker? Cause I'm pretty sure they ate rats back then. I'm pretty fucking sure. Anything back then was a meal, honestly, but it's just the way that they probably improperly cooked them bitches. Just like with the tapeworm situation. Constantly eating raw fish and shit.
Forms: pneumonic, septicemic, and bubonic. And while we don't know which one the man had, it clearly killed him, and unbeknownst to him, would proceed to kill over 100 million other people through the
The year outbreak began. So the plague, then the plague of Justina, then the Japanese smallpox epidemic, then the Black Death. The number before each name is the number, not percentage, of people killed by the disease. The volume of each bar represents the percentage of the world population killed by the disease. Damn. So 5 million for the plague, 30 to 50 million for the plague of Justina, 1 million for the smallpox, 200 million for Black Death. Damn. $200 million, y'all. 200 million people got wiped off this earth by the Black Death. In reality, the earth caught more bodies than it probably ever withheld itself from the starting point of the earth being made. That bitch started to collect bodies as soon as that bitch been made. Damn. That shit. And the Ebola only took out 11K. HIV took out 25 mil. Boy.
years. Which is crazy. I mean, seriously, nature just seemed to be more messed up back then. And I already know I mentioned it, but we as humanity seem to follow that trend, especially during the Neolithic. And there was a buffet of mimed skeletons to choose from that time. And that pun is intended because many of them showed signs of cannibalism. Additionally, we also have nicely preserved specimens that show us that one could go through dismemberment, decapitation, being burned alive, stabbed, bludgeoned, shot with an arrow, or sometimes a combination of all these things together. And obviously, while violence still occurs, in many ways it is comparatively much more tamed in the present. And I should also mention, there is also the trend of doing this to large groups, as well over 100 mass murder sites are known from throughout the world, showcasing ancient man's enthusiasm for violence and creativity and cruelty. Maybe the takeaway is that for all the flaws of the present, maybe today isn't so bad after all.
Facts, cause boy, I would have hate to be living around the time the Black Plague then dropped. The Spanish flu then dropped. Let me go back to that picture. Let me go back to that fucking picture, bro, cause I would hate to be born when the Black Plague dropped, the Plague of Justina dropped, the New World smallpox outbreak. These the three, and the Spanish flu. Them seem the more deadliest. Like, bro, hell no. Hell no. Mm-mm. Mm-mm. Not fucking with it. Not fucking with it. Not fucking with it at all. Man, if you enjoyed this video, man, drop a like, comment, subscribe. It's been your boy Rell, man. Peace.